foreign ministers a renewed commitment to hold free and fair elections before March 31, 2009. Clearly the foreign ministers were yet to be convinced of the Commodore's sincerity. So Scoop sought the views of AUT University's Associate Professor David Robie, who is currently the Director of AUT's Pacific Media Centre. Professor Robie is a Fiji specialist, having taught at the University of South Pacific for many years. He also observed Fiji's coup culture up close.
Some views on that and a little bit more detail on some of the concerns.
Well, for a start, the regime, and let's call it that, and I think one of the things that news media is rather poor, and particularly in New Zealand, sort of always referring to this interim government. It's a military-backed regime. Let's be upfront with that. But it does have, it's really suffering from a poor media image. It's curious because the military only just a few years ago had a number of their staff going through journalism school and so on. But there hasn't been really the other side of the story, and that is the rather one-sided coverage by media in Fiji generally.
Are you saying that there are levels of acceptance here relating to the controls that are being imposed upon journalists in Fiji?
No, I'm saying that much of the media coverage in New Zealand has actually sort of blown up a lot of things out of proportion, relatively, globally. And not actually recognised. In fact, there's still considerable freedom. What's missing, I think, is the other side of the debate. I mean, like for example, the policies that this regime has been advocating. Ostensibly it came in on a groundswell against corruption, and yet the portrayal by the media in countries such as Australia and New Zealand and so on is that the Ingrassi government, the one ousted by Bainimarama, some paragon of democracy. That's a farce because it was a corrupt regime, it was a racist regime. It cynically used the democratic processes and the legal processes to institute or institutionalise various forms of racism. And that was the government, the so-called democratic government, and that was only elected on the basis of fear after the previous George Speight coup, and that's the government that was sort of thrown out by the military regime.
Do you feel that there was an element of justification there for the military to jump across the constitutional divide and actually overthrow a government?
A lot of people in Fiji believe that, and even in the last stages when Ingrassi was fighting for a survival of his government, he actually went on record as sort of encouraging people to come out against Indo-Fijians, and that was so cynical. And so even in those stages, he was playing the race card. To his credit, Bainimarama, the military commander, and the military is essentially all indigenous Fijian anyway, came in trying to actually sort of set in process a move back to a fair and just multiracial and multicultural society. One point I'd like to make is that had the Ingrassi government stayed in power, it would have included members of the leaders of the previous coup, the George Speight, the collaborators and the plotters, and they would have taken key positions in Parliament.
If we look at the timeline between now and the end of March next year, what's your views on that? Do you feel it's able to, and at what cost if it doesn't?
I quite honestly don't believe that they can actually meet that roadmap, and so there'll be various pretexts and so on why that won't actually happen.